Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey everyone, so in this video today I'm going to share my process for editing my digital photographs shot using the Fujifilm GFX and also the X100, and we'll do a bit of a deep dive and I'll just show you how I get them to a point where they're consistent with my film work. So we're going to look at both color and black and white images. I'll show you the presets that I use, including a new one that I've been making that I'll put up for download. And then we're going to edit a few images from start to finish, and I'll talk about the intent behind it all. So with both film and digital, after working with them side by side for quite some time now, I am of the belief that both formats can end up looking very similar to one another, and oftentimes the end result is most heavily influenced just by like your personal style and your creative decisions you make during editing afterwards. And with digital, the challenge has always been for me, how do you get to that point? You know, with film, you kind of have this look baked in right away and you go and you make some tweaks. It's one of the things I've always loved about it. But with digital, you have this blank slate, which is great, but it can be tough to just figure out like, how do I get to that point? Which methods do I use? Which tools do I use? So that's what I'm going to share today. I hope this helps. And we'll jump on the computer and we'll start with black and white. Okay, so I've been shooting mostly black and white since I moved over here. And right now my focus is on this work in whale. So there's like this one look that I've been going for that I enjoy the most, regardless of which format I'm shooting on. And that is just like this darker look with these like high contrast elements where you still have like, you know, subtle details in the midtones and in the dark areas. Like it's not crushed, but it's still contrasty. So this is like the never ending learning process of kind of figuring out this look and how to kind of make it the best possible to my likings at least. So this is GFX 100S. And this here is Ilford HP5, so film, digital. And this next one right here is film as well. So like a very similar work throughout. Like I said, regardless of which format I'm using, I end up a lot of the times in the same place. And with my digital files, the route I've been going to get there has been using Fuji's built-in Acros profile. I've played around with a few others, but I've really enjoyed this one the best. And it wasn't until recently that I actually shot some Acros film for the first time that I realized how close this actually is to film, Fuji's built-in profile. So this right here is from my previous video on the Midicon 65mm on the GFX 50R. And this is Pentax 6.7, 105 2.4, and Acros. So if we go back, we'll grab the Midicon here and we'll throw up the actual Acros film on the left. So let's make sure I got this right. Film on left. And yeah, they're so close. I just want to make sure I'm not messing this up. But film on left, digital on right. So you can see they're so incredibly close to one another. And if I open this panel, you'll see that the digital file, like pretty minor tweaks, you know, a little bit of tonal adjustments and an exposure adjustment, but it just comes so close to matching one another. So I've always really enjoyed Acros, but it was cool to actually shoot some side by side and realize that the profile actually looks pretty close to film. So real quick, this is another image from that same video. I'll go ahead and I'll crop it down to 4:5 because I shot some film beside this one as well. I'll just show you how close this comes and how easily it is. And always, you know, with color and with black and white, I'm almost always just doing a quick exposure adjustment. I'll set my crop and then I'll go and I'll pick my preset. And then I'll kind of come back and make any like precise tonal adjustments. So for this one, we'll go into the profile browser here and I'm going to go and just select Acros. And then I'd probably go, and obviously want to make some tweaks here, some tonal adjustments. Obviously those highlights are pretty crazy in the background. So, you know, if this was like a proper image that I was using for something, I would spend a little more time isolating that. But I do have this curve preset I make that basically just like pulls down the highlights and lifts up the blacks ever so slightly for situations like this where they're quite crushed. So, you know, would maybe use it. But anyways, if we go and we go to compare again, I'll drop the corresponding film frame on the left. So that's film, and on the right is the Midicon. So I would maybe make a few more adjustments after seeing this side by side, but the point of me showing this to you is just to see how close these actually come to one another. So really need to see that, but let's edit. We're gonna edit 2 actual images from my portfolio from the Slate City. This is maybe actually cheating a little bit. I don't know if I'm gonna include this one because this isn't in the boundaries of the project, but it's an image I would otherwise include because I really like it. So again, first thing I would do, go and set my crop, almost always with the GFX. I'm shooting 4:5. It's what I enjoy the most. And then with all this black and white work, I'm always dropping the exposure down or shooting with exposure compensation because again, that look that I want is this like darker look with these like, you know, high contrast elements, but then still maintaining these like subtle tones throughout. So drop the exposure down a bit, and then I'm gonna go and apply the profile before I do anything else. So we'll go and we'll just select Acros again. Sometimes I'll explore the like color filters to see if they help. I think for this one, I'll probably just stick with the regular Acros, but now I would go and I would bring these highlights down a little bit. I'm always careful with this too. With color, it's a little different, but like the last thing I want to do is pull this all the way down and you get this kind of like HDR looking sky. It's not my style. So there's a balance of it still like being bright, but bringing some definition back in. So maybe something like that, bring the whites down, and then I would possibly bring these blacks up just a bit. Because what I want is I just want to maintain these like, you know, transitions, these tones throughout the dark areas. And like, I personally don't want like a really crunchy image like that. I kind of want it to be contrasty without being chunky, I guess, if that makes sense. But a lot of the times with black and white, I'll go and I will do a little bit of like local contrast adjustments. So I'll almost always go up here, grab a brush. I'll just crank the highlights and the whites to 100, and I just keep the flow and the density a little bit lower. So we'll check off the mask here just so we can see what we're doing. But basically, I want to just like accent these little highlight areas on this slate here that's getting hit by this sunlight. So I'll just do this like, you know, pretty rough. I'm not too worried about being like exactly precise, just because like all of these adjustments are going to be super subtle. So try something like that. We'll check this off, and then we'll turn this off. So that's with it off, and that's with it on. Off, on. So I like how that looks. Now leaving that on, I would go and I'd maybe even pull my exposure down a bit more. Again, looking to keep this like pretty dark, but still have some like tones throughout those areas. So, you know, somewhere around here, I would say this is getting pretty close to an image that I'm happy with. I would maybe even increase the contrast a bit and then open these shadows up. But it's always just like this dance with these dark areas, trying to get them dark, but still have detail. So I'm quite happy with that. And then when it comes to grain, I have this preset 120 grain, and it is pretty subtle. If we go into 100%, this is GFX 100S, by the way, which I didn't mention, but that is with the grain on and that's off. So this is just like a saved thing I made just with the size drop down amount up. This is kind of based off one of those Acros images from before and going just a little bit heavier, but that's kind of what I enjoy for this GFX stuff. So happy with that look. And then one more really quick, I'm gonna try and get this moving on because I don't want this video to be like an hour long. Same deal for this. So I like this scene, you know, you have this bright sky and then you have this, it reflecting in this path. And this is like, you know, got good potential for a nice black and white image. So I drop the exposure down a bit. I'm gonna crop this to 4:5. And now I'll just simply go and apply my Acros profile. And for this one, I might even explore maybe Acros with the yellow filter just to bring out a little bit more definition in this grass. And then I would bring the whites up and maybe drop the actual highlights down. Again, it's just this balance of trying to find what looks good without it being too chunky. Bring the blacks up a little bit. Maybe something like that. And then one tool that I actually do use, I should have mentioned this in the previous image, but are these presence sliders. So clarity, not so much for black and white, because obviously, you know, if, say we take that up to 100, you can see it's pretty heavy-handed. But this texture one you'll see is a lot kind of more subtle. So sometimes I'll bring this up to like, you know, 15 or something. So that's on and that's off. You might not even be able to see this on the screen, but it just brings out like a little bit more detail, which can help with those like subtle gradations or subtle differences in tones. Even if we go back to this image, you'll see that it might work nice on whenever this loads. See, we pull it way up, you'll see it defines those highlight areas. Obviously we want to drop that way down, but let's go to 15. So that's on. And that's off. It's so subtle. Probably can't see this on the internet, but that is a tool I like to use as well. But yeah, that's kind of my approach for black and white. I would obviously spend a little bit more time on these if they were actual edits I was doing for my portfolio. But you'll see, like, if we do some side-by-sides, going back to that original work, it all has this consistent feel. You know, this one on the left is film. This is obviously the digital one we just edited. Same with this original image. And same with this one. So again, I think it all comes down to this, like, whatever your vision is, you often end up in very similar places regardless of what tool you use. But, you know, black and white, I would say, is for sure the easier of the bunch compared to color to get your digital images to a similar place. Back to the video in a second, just have to quickly talk about the sponsor today, which is Squarespace. One of the things on my to-do list this year is to give my website a bit of a refresh and an update, and Squarespace has been a really great tool to do just that. They have a wide range of really nice, clean, professional templates to choose from, and then I just love the simplicity and the ease of use. So, for example, I'm building out a gallery with some of my recent work from Wales, and just being able to click on images and drag them to rearrange and reorder is really great when you're building out sequences. You can also add things like an online store if you want to sell prints, books, zines, things like that. So check out squarespace.com today for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can use my link below to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Just like with the black and white stuff, I use one of Fuji's presets. Almost always, it's Classic Chrome as my go-to, but I have played around with other presets, and there is one other one that I've been using recently that I've been happy with. I would still say Classic Chrome, this modified version I've made, is my go-to, but I have some by, it's called the Classic Lab presets. You basically buy this pack, you get all these different ones. So there's color negative, color positive, you have all these different looks. And it's a matter of just like finding the one in there that you like the best. So I'll show you that. There is one that I've been using quite a bit, but we'll go ahead and we'll just first crop this image, something like that. I would, again, I'm just looking to do some exposure adjustments. I'm gonna do most of that after the preset's applied, and I would fix this white balance a little bit, maybe warm it up, but again, I'll do these tweaks after. So we'll go back, so color negative films with the Classic Lab. Like I said, there's all these different ones, you know, Agfa Portrait, Optima, and then they have different exposure levels. So these ones are quite nice because they're not too heavy-handed. You still have to, like, I find, drop the contrast a lot and make some other tweaks, but compared to some other ones I've used, they're pretty good. So I have a version up here, Portrait 400 modified. So this is just one that I saved with kind of the like tweaks that I like. And even right away, I would drop this saturation down a bit. But even that looks pretty good. I would go down and I'd fix, just do it under the manual lens corrections. I would fix some of that vignetting just because the Midicon vignette's pretty good. But yeah, something like that's looking pretty good. So I like this look. I think that these presets are quite nice once you kind of learn them and modify them a little bit. And I would recommend checking them out. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I purchased these with my own money. I've been enjoying them. But yeah, that's a pretty good look right there. And they also have these profiles. So they come with these scanner profiles. So the presets are obviously just presets, and out of the box they use the Adobe Color profile. But then you can go and you can pick these scanner profiles. So this one right here is supposed to like mimic a Frontier. So that's on and that's off. And they do a nice job kind of like softening up the contrast a bit, and skin tones look quite nice. So these have been good, but this one that I have been using, like I said, is a classic chrome tweaked version that I made. So this right here, on the left, well, and on the right at the moment, this is Kodak Portra 400. These are some color charts I shot when I was going to make another preset, which I still plan on making at some point. But I actually, for this video, went and just tried mine on it for fun. This isn't supposed to be like a mimic of Portra, but you'll see if we go ahead and select it, and then we just do a bit of maybe a saturation adjustment and a little bit to the blacks. It's not bad. It's not, again, supposed to be a match, but I find it does have some similarities to Portra, as you'll see in a second. But this is basically me taking classic chrome and doing a whole bunch of hue, saturation, luminance adjustments to kind of better suit my taste, but also the landscape here in England. And it just so happens that this has ended up being like a nice universal preset, even for the work that I was doing in the American Southwest. So yeah, I'll put a link to this if any of you want to download it. It'll be below. But this has been one that I've really enjoyed, and I'll show you. Right here, this is Portra 400, the Pentax 645. And this is the X100V with this Kyle's Classic Chrome, this modified one that I did. And if we go and we do a comparison, we'll put the Portra 400 on the left and this modified preset on the right. You'll see they share a lot of similarities. It's not an exact match. Obviously, I've gone in and made some tweaks here afterwards with tone and saturation, but it looks pretty good. So this is one that I've been really happy with. I made a preset ages ago that I gave away for free, a Portra style one, but it's needed an update for a while. So anyways, if you want to check this one out, I'll put a link below. But we'll edit a couple images from the Southwest. I'll show you kind of how it works. And again, with this one, my goal was to just like change mostly HSL and leave these tonal adjustments because every image is different, and I figure like I'll apply it and then I'll make my tweaks afterwards rather than like baking in highlight and shadow adjustments and stuff. So with this one, we'll crop, I almost always crop my 35 stuff on digital for this series at least down to 4:3. And then obviously this needs a pretty big exposure boost, white balance, and I'll pull some of that magenta out. And this is really what it's all about. It's just like fixing the exposure, fixing the white balance-ish, and getting like a good base to go and apply one of these. But we'll go and we'll pick Kyle's Classic Chrome, and then I'll go and I'll make some adjustments from here. So now I would pull these highlights down. I would probably pull a little more green into this, open up those shadows, and I would pull some saturation out. So maybe something like that, go and apply this grain. And yeah, I mean, for how quick we did that, that's not bad at all. So we'll go back and you'll see if we turn this whole panel off, you'll see the difference. So it changes a lot depending on the colors you have in your frame, but the blues, the luminance of the blues is kind of jacked up. The yellows and the orange push a little more green, take some of that like pink purple out that the Classic Chrome has. So this one is nice. So we'll also just do a quick edit on this file here so you can see how it works for, you know, this palette in the Southwest. I can actually go and crop this properly. So did I do 4? No, 4:3. Okay, we're good. I'll probably leave the exposure for now. I'll definitely warm this image up. This was sunset. Pull some of that magenta out, and then we'll go and we'll pick this Classic Chrome. And I'd probably pull these highlights down a bit. Maybe open these shadows up. And then drop the saturation a little bit. Again, just doing this quick. But let's go down here. We'll turn this panel off and turn it back on. So again, pushing the luminance of the blues, changing the oranges a little bit. That's kind of my preference of how this looks. And then the one thing that's baked into this preset is just dropping this clarity slider down. So pulling some of that mid-tone contrast out, and we'll put it back to 0. So if you look kind of even at these highlight areas here, so this is off, that's on, off, on. And I find with color work, this is nice. Obviously, you know, if you went to the extremes, it starts to get really soft, but it's a nice way just to like bring a little bit of softness to those highlight areas. But my initial tweaks with this preset were for the work here in England. And the big thing is just, you know, completely different palette, a lot of greens. And I always struggled with like the browny orangey greens. So this is Fuji Pro 400H film scanned with a Frontier. And I love these greens. They're like, you know, pushing towards blue. They're almost like a little bit minty. So that's kind of the look that I was after. Somewhat similar to that. So we'll just do this image quick here. We'll crop this down to 4:5. Bring the exposure down a little bit. And this is where you'll see a really big difference with this. So we'll go up and we'll select the modified preset. And you can see right away, there's a pretty big change in these greens. Go and warm this up. Pull the highlights down a bit. Maybe open the shadows up. But if we go down to this HSL and we turn it off, you'll see without, you know, they're quite yellow. So closer to what we were kind of seeing with that actual Fuji Pro 400H. So I really like this. This has kind of made me enjoy starting to edit color work here in England, but also stuff back in Canada, obviously with a lot of green and whatnot. So this just actually works really nice for a lot of images. It's like a pretty good universal preset. This was GFX 50R with the Midicon, so I would go and I would crop this down to 4:5, and then bring that exposure up, white balance up, and we go and apply the preset, just like that. And then I would probably bring a little more saturation into this, bring these highlights down, maybe bring the shadows up. So like, pretty simple. Even this I like quite a bit. And it's not like I'm sitting here, you know, tweaking all sorts of things to try and get this look. But yeah, it's nice. Just some simple tweaks to classic chrome. You'll even see when I turn it off, there are these like pink kind of purple red shift almost in the bricks. So just kind of correcting some of that. This is one down by the seafront. Maybe we'll do this one quickly. Let's do our crop here. Something like that. Bring our exposure and white balance. And now we'll try this preset. Bring that saturation back up. Probably bring this exposure up quite a bit. Highlights down, and maybe just cool this down a little bit. So yeah, doing this quickly, even something like that, simple tweaks, and it doesn't look too bad at all. This is like a look that I would go for with a lot of my images, regardless of kind of what format I shot on. I'd probably even open these shadows up a bit more, keep those blacks down. Okay, one last image here for color though. This is back in Canada, and this is one that I would also use that classic chrome one for. So I'll go ahead and I'll crop to 4:5, something like that. Just keeping that motel sign nice and centered. And then I would definitely warm this one up a little bit, but I don't think I'm gonna touch exposure or highlights or anything until I apply this preset. So we'll grab that. This is GFX 50R, by the way. And now I'd go and I'd pull these highlights down a little bit. I'd maybe warm this up a bit more. And maybe just pull these blacks up a bit. Something like that. Oftentimes I find myself zooming these images out as well and just going to full screen mode for a second just to get a feel for how they look with a lot of white space. But even that's looking pretty good already. Maybe warm this up a bit more. And you'll see if we go into 100%, especially like up around these trees, if we go and we put that clarity back to 0, it's quite a different look. So it does kind of bloom these high contrast edges. It's quite nice. But even that I'm pretty happy with. Just shifting those greens so they aren't as, say, like orange and brown. And yeah, I like this look. It's everything I like about classic chrome and tweaking the things that I didn't like about it. So just some minor adjustments. But that's right now the simplicity of my color workflow is, you know, definitely playing around with the Classic Lab presets a little bit, but also for a lot of the work, just using this modified classic chrome one. So yeah, download it, have a try, see if you like it. But that's pretty much how I treat both black and white and color images with these Fuji systems. Okay, so that wraps up this one. I hope you enjoyed that, took something away. This is my approach that I find is somewhat simple and it brings me consistency, which both of those things I think are really important when it comes to digital editing, just so you aren't like trying a million different things every time you open up your editing software. Like I said, I'll put that preset below if you want to download it. Check it out, try it out, probably tweak it over time, but I've been enjoying it, so maybe it'll work for you as well. But yeah, that wraps this up. Thank you as always for watching.